Life has a way of catching you off guard, throwing unexpected events your way, and sometimes, you don't realize what's happening until it's too late. That's exactly what happened to me. Honestly, I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, yet here I am, sharing a story I wouldn't believe if someone else told it. It all started when my husband, Alex, was called away on a last-minute business trip. This wasn't unusual. His job often required him to travel, but this time felt different. Maybe it was the way he rushed out the door, barely giving me time to process that he'd be gone for 2 weeks. He kissed me on the cheek, grabbed his bags and said, "I'll call you when I land." And just like that, he was gone. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was used to being alone when he traveled, but later that evening, a knock at the door caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before peeking through the peephole. It was Ethan, our new neighbor. Let me tell you about Ethan. He moved in next door about 6 months ago, but I didn't know much about him. We had exchanged polite waves a few times, but that was about it. He had a presence tall, broad-shouldered, with an effortless confidence and a smile that could light up a room. "Hey," he said when I opened the door. "Sorry to bother you, but I noticed your porch light flickering and thought I'd let you know." "Oh, thanks," I replied, suddenly aware that I was wearing an old sweatshirt and yoga pants. "I've been meaning to fix that." "No problem. I have some spare bulbs. If you need one, I can swap it out for you real quick," he offered. Normally, I would have politely declined, but something in his tone made me trust him. "That'd be great," I said, stepping aside to let him in. I watched as he worked, his movements smooth and efficient. We made small talk, and before I knew it, I was laughing at his jokes more than I expected. When he finished, he turned to me and said, "There you go. Good as new." "Thank you so much, Ethan. I owe you one," I said. "Don't mention it. That's what neighbors are for," he replied with a grin before heading out. As he left, a strange feeling lingered. It wasn't anything he said or did, it was just him. His presence. The way he carried himself. It was refreshing, especially since Alex and I had fallen into a predictable routine. I shook my head, pushing the thought aside, but that was just the beginning. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Let me know if you ever need help with anything else. Happy to lend a hand." My heart skipped a beat, and I didn't understand why. I stared at the message longer than I should have, my mind racing. Why was I overthinking this? It was just a friendly text, right? I typed a quick, casual reply. "Thanks, Ethan." Short, simple. No room for misinterpretation. Yet, as I set my phone down, I couldn't shake the strange mix of curiosity and unease. The next morning, I went about my day, trying to forget about it. But around noon, I suddenly remembered something. Kitchen faucet had been leaking for weeks. Alex had promised to fix it, but life got in the way. Normally, I'd call a plumber, but Ethan's message lingered in my mind. So, I sent him a quick text. "Hey Ethan, do you know anything about fixing faucets? Mine's been dripping non-stop and it's driving me crazy." His response came almost immediately. "I can take a look. Be there in 10. 10 minutes later, there he was, standing at my door, toolbox in hand. Even in a simple t-shirt and jeans, he looked effortlessly put together. "Show me the culprit," he said with that easy grin. I led him to the kitchen, and as he worked under the sink, we talked more than I expected. He told me about his job as a graphic designer, his love for cooking, and how he had moved here after a tough breakup. "I figured a fresh start would do me good," he said, his voice steady but carrying something deeper. I nodded, unsure what to say. "Well, I'm glad you ended up here. You've been a great neighbor." "Thanks," he said, glancing up at me from under the sink. "It's nice to have someone to talk to. This place can get lonely sometimes." I didn't know what it was, maybe the way he said it, or the fact that I had been feeling lonely myself, but his words stuck with me. After about 20 minutes, he stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. "All fixed," he said, turning the faucet. As I handed him the handle, I couldn't help but smile. "You're a lifesaver," I said sincerely. "How much do I owe you?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Nothing. Consider it payback for all the times I've borrowed your Wi-Fi when mine went down." I laughed too, though I couldn't recall ever giving him the password. "Well, thank you really." He lingered for a while, and before we knew it, we were chatting over a cup of coffee. The conversation flowed so naturally that an hour had passed without me even realizing it. When he finally left, I found myself staring at the empty coffee mugs on the table, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Later that evening, as I scrolled through my phone, a notification popped up. Ethan had followed me on Instagram. My thumb hovered over the screen, hesitating for just a second before I tapped follow back. Over the next few days, everything between us remained perfectly normal, or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. He would wave when I checked the mail, or send a random meme that had me laughing out loud. It felt harmless, even refreshing. Then Saturday arrived. I had planned to spend the day catching up on chores, but as I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Hey, I'm grilling out later, want to join?" Just a casual thing. I froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. Alex was still out of town, and I had no other plans. Was it strange? Then again, it was just a barbecue-friendly invitation, nothing more. "Sure, sounds great," I replied before I could overthink it. A few hours later, I stood in Ethan's backyard, holding a plate of grilled chicken and vegetables. The setup was simple but inviting: a small table draped with a checkered tablecloth, a portable grill, and a cooler stocked with drinks. "It's not much, but it works," Ethan said, handing me a soda. "It's perfect," I replied, and I meant it. There was something so effortless about it, a stark contrast to the formal dinners I usually attended with Alex's colleagues. As we ate, conversation flowed with ease. We talked about everything and nothing: our favorite movies, embarrassing childhood stories, even our worst cooking disasters. It felt so natural, so effortless. At one point, Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying me with a curious expression. "You know, you're not what I expected." I raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" He chuckled. "When I first moved in, I figured you'd be one of those distant neighbors who only waves out of obligation. But you're real down to earth." I felt my cheeks warm. "Well, I could say the same about you. You've been more helpful this past week than some people have been in years." He smiled, and for a moment, silence settled between us, not awkward, but charged, like the stillness before a storm. I cleared my throat and stood up, breaking the moment. "I should probably get going. I've got a million things to do tomorrow." "Of course," Ethan said, standing as well. "Thanks for coming. It was nice having some company." "It was fun," I said with a small smile. "Thanks for inviting me." As I walked back to my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't anything Ethan had said or done, it was something within me. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed that much or felt so alive. That night, as I curled up on the couch, scrolling through my phone, I noticed Ethan had posted a photo from the barbecue. It was a candid shot of the table, but my plate was unmistakably in the frame. The caption read, "Good food, even better company." My heart raced as I stared at the screen. What did he mean by that? The next morning, I woke up with Ethan's Instagram post still on my mind. I couldn't tell if I was reading too much into it, or if there was something more behind his words. Shaking it off, I busied myself with errands, but my phone kept lighting up with his name. First, he sent a funny meme. Then, a message about how his coffee machine had broken, leaving him tragically undercaffeinated. Each text seemed casual, but there was a warmth to them that I couldn't ignore. By the afternoon, I found myself standing in my kitchen, staring at the untouched groceries I had just bought when my phone buzzed again. "Ethan, what's for dinner tonight? I might need to invite myself over if it's anything good." I laughed, replying without thinking. "Only if you don't mind. Takeout cooking isn't happening tonight." "Perfect, I'll bring dessert," he answered almost instantly. It felt easy, too easy. But when he arrived that evening, I told myself it was still innocent. Neighbors shared meals all the time, right? We sat in my living room, takeout boxes spread across the coffee table. Ethan had brought over a small container of homemade chocolate mousse, which turned out to be better than anything I'd had in a restaurant. "You made this?" I asked, surprised. He grinned. "Cooking's kind of my therapy, it's how I unwind." "Well, it's unfair how good this is," I said, taking another bite. The conversation, as always, flowed effortlessly. But tonight, something was different. The way his eyes lingered on me just a little longer. The way I laughed at his jokes just a little too freely. At one point, Ethan leaned back on the couch, his gaze fixed on me, and I suddenly felt the weight of the moment. Ethan leaned back on the couch, his expression thoughtful. "You're really easy to talk to, you know that?" I glanced at him, keeping my tone light. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," he said, his voice quieter now. "I don't think I've felt this comfortable around someone in a long time." I didn't know how to respond. His words stirred something in me, a mix of guilt and something else I wasn't ready to acknowledge. I looked away, focusing on the empty takeout containers. "I should probably clean this up," I said quickly, standing. "I'll help," Ethan offered, following me into the kitchen. We worked in silence, but the air between us was heavy with unspoken words. As I reached for a dish towel, our hands brushed, and I froze. It was such a small thing, yet it sent a jolt through me. "Sorry," he said softly, stepping back. "It's fine," I replied, avoiding his gaze. "Thanks for helping with the dishes." Sensing the shift in mood, Ethan grabbed his jacket. "I should get going. Thanks for dinner, and for letting me crash your evening." "Anytime," I said, forcing a smile. He hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, but instead, he nodded and walked out the door. The moment it closed, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "I hope I didn't overstep tonight. I just really enjoy being around you." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure what to say or even what I should say. I reread his message over and over, my mind racing. What did he mean? Was he just being kind, or was there more behind his words? My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, searching for the right reply, something casual, something that wouldn't encourage anything, but wouldn't shut it down either. "You didn't overstep. It's nice having company while Alex is away." I hit send and instantly regretted it. Why had I mentioned Alex? Was I trying to remind Ethan or myself that I was married? His response came quickly. "Glad to hear that. Let me know if you ever need company again." I set my phone down, my stomach in knots. Part of me knew I should create some distance between us, but another part I didn't want to admit existed enjoyed the attention. It had been a long time since someone looked at me the way Ethan did, since someone made me feel seen. The next few days passed uneventfully. I threw myself into work, ran errands, and avoided Ethan. But even as I kept my distance, I couldn't stop thinking about him, his laugh, the way he genuinely enjoyed our conversations, the way his presence filled the space around him. Then, on Friday evening, everything changed. A sudden summer storm rolled in, drenching the streets in minutes. I curled up on the couch with a movie, the sound of rain pounding against the windows. Then, a knock at the door. I opened it to find Ethan standing there, soaked to the bone, a bottle of wine in hand. "Ethan, what are you doing out in this weather?" I asked, stepping aside to let him in. "My power's out," he said, shaking water from his hair. "Figured I'd check if yours was still on, and bring this as a peace offering for intruding." He lifted the bottle with a sheepish grin. I hesitated. I should have sent him home. But the storm was relentless, and he looked genuinely miserable. "Come in. I'll grab you a towel." As he dried off, I poured us each a glass of wine. "You really didn't have to come over," I said as we sat down. He shrugged. "Didn't feel like sitting in the dark. Besides, your company's better than staring at the wall." The storm outside only heightened the tension between us. The rain lashed against the windows, the candlelight flickered as the lights dimmed for a moment. It all felt too intimate, too close. We talked as we always did, conversation flowing easily. But this time, there was an edge to it, an unspoken weight lingering in the space between us. At one point, Ethan leaned forward, his gaze locked onto mine. "You know," he murmured, his voice low, "I've never met anyone like you. You're smart, funny, and you don't even realize how incredible you are." I froze, my heart pounding. "Ethan, He exhaled, leaning back, running a hand through his hair. "I know you're married. I'm not trying to cross any lines, but I can't pretend I don't feel this way." His words hung between us, heavy and undeniable. I should have shut it down, told him to leave, reminded both of us of the boundaries we weren't supposed to cross. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, unable to look away. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of rain. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan replied, standing up. I just needed to be honest with you. He walked toward the door, his hand resting on the knob. I'm sorry if I made things complicated, that was never my intention. Ethan, wait, I said, standing before I even realized it. He turned to face me, and for a moment, everything else faded: the storm, the tension, the unspoken emotions between us. It all came crashing down in that single, charged second. Ethan hesitated, his grip still on the door. If you tell me to leave, I will, he said quietly. But if even a part of you feels what I feel, just say the word. I stared at him, my pulse roaring in my ears. Whatever I said next would change everything. The air was thick with something unspoken, the weight of his words pressing against me. My mind screamed at me to stop this, to draw the line before we crossed it. But I didn't speak. I just stood there, frozen, my heart racing. Ethan didn't move, he wasn't pressuring me, wasn't asking for more, he was just waiting. His restraint only made it harder. I can't, I finally whispered, my voice unsteady. This isn't right. I know, he said softly, cutting me off before I could say more. I know it's not, but that doesn't change how I feel. He took a step closer, his eyes searching mine. I'm not asking for anything, Ethan said softly. I just needed you to know. I couldn't breathe. My mind was a storm of emotions: guilt, fear, confusion, and something else I refused to name. I felt trapped between what I knew was right and what my heart was desperately pulling me toward. Ethan, we can't do this, I finally said, forcing my voice to steady. We haven't done anything, he replied, his tone calm, though his eyes held something raw. But tell me, honest, if you weren't in the picture, would things be different? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to lie, to say no, to tell him that nothing would ever change. But I couldn't. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, a sad smile tugging at his lips. That's all I needed to hear. He turned toward the door, his fingers tightening around the knob. Good night, Evelyn. Good night, Ethan, I whispered as he stepped out into the storm, his figure vanishing into the darkness. I closed the door and leaned against it, tears streaming down my face. What had I done? What was I doing? The storm outside raged on, mirroring the chaos inside me. I told myself I had just avoided a mistake, or maybe I hadn't. Because even though nothing had happened, the feelings were still there, hanging in the air like the scent of rain. Life has a way of throwing unexpected moments at you, and sometimes, you don't realize what's unfolding until it's too late. That's exactly what happened to me. Honestly, I never thought I'd even consider something like this. But here I am, sharing a story I wouldn't believe if someone else had told it. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world and helps create a space where we can share, reflect, and grow together.